Hi everybody, it's Dr. John and welcome to the month of June, Strategic Internet Public Relations. This is an exciting class. You are going to have your critical thinking skills pushed to the very limit. When I worked at Disney, I had a mentor, and I remember when I first interviewed with the mentor, I had to get into the role that I was looking, I had a number of interviews plus a number of simulations that I had to work through in an assessment center. And JB, I sat down with JB and we did a meet and greet. And one of the questions I had for JB, particularly after I learned about his background was that he had a zoological degree. Now, granted, Disney does have a zoological park, but that's not where we were working. That's not what he was hired for. In fact, his first job out of college, he ran the Connecticut State Planetarium. Again, science related, but nothing to do with zoology. So I said, JB, why do you do what you do at Disney, which was organization development? Why are you in this role? Why are you in this department? And he said, I'm in this role because every day I am skating at the very edge of my competencies. And I thought, wow, what a powerful statement. Meaning that every day you're faced with unknowns. And the way that you can deal with unknowns is to say, that's not my job. Or you can say, bring it on. And JB was somebody that said, bring it on. Well, in my career, I've been somebody that said, bring it on. Put me in the toughest position and let's go. So as soon as we had that conversation, I knew I still had a few more meet and greets / interviews, and I had to do the assessment center yet, but I knew I had found my home. And it was for a little over 10 years. All right. So this month we're gonna have you skating at the very edge of your competency. So lace up those skates really tight and get ready. Now, for some practical information, the first week we're laying the foundation for what strategic internet public relations is. And the one thing I want you to understand is that what we're dealing with is communication. So when we think about marketing communication, we can think of 3 different channels. We can think of the channel where we have to pay to have people tell our story. We have the channel where we own the media so we can control what we put out there to a certain extent. There's always going to be censors in life. And it doesn't, even if we have free speech, there's always guidelines. So we have to fall within those guidelines. So even though we may own our channel, there's always somebody that could come along, the ISP, for example, and decide to off-platform us. But for the most part, we own the channel and we can put what message we want. We can't put illegal messages. The third channel is the earned media channel. Now, you've already been operating in the earned media channel when you took new media marketing. When we have influencers and we have brand ambassadors that we're asking to tell our story. Now, I know you're yelling, wait a minute. We have to pay influencers to tell our story. You have to incentivize influencers to tell your story. You're not paying them enough money to be spokespeople. For example, do any of you listen to talk radio? Talk radio show hosts are notorious for weaving into the show content commercials. They may talk about the fact that they're using the product, etc., etc. That's not ad lib. That is a scripted commercial that the radio host has been given, and they're reading as if and some of them don't even do a good job of reading or disguising it. You can tell they're reading right off the script. Others, and it depends on the host, the sponsor, the advertiser, may give them some level of carte blanche. It's just like in a movie. Uh, Caddyshack, if any of you have ever seen Caddyshack, one of the funniest movies ever. Well, if you take the all the stories that have been written about Caddyshack, uh, you will know that Bill Murray was basically just given a sketch of his character, and all his lines throughout the entire movie were ad libbed, and so those are the exceptions. Those are not the rule. All right, a spokesperson is an influencer, but they are paid. They're paid very, very well to say exactly what is on the script. And that's not what we're dealing with the earned media channel. We want to incentivize people to tell our story. And when it comes to influencers, yeah, there may be a barter, there may be trade, there may be even some financial arrangement, but it's nowhere close to what advertising would cost. When we talk about public relations, there's a cost as well. What do we have to pay other people to tell our story? Well, the answer is that they are only going to tell our story if they think by telling our story, we are enhancing their brand. So what they look for are newsworthy stories, newsworthy events. We'll talk more about that in week 2. When we can present a reporter, either a legacy reporter or a new media reporter, a newsworthy event, they're going to want to tell the story, because when they tell newsworthy events, what happens? Their brand is built. The more their brand is built, the more opportunity they have to sell their product, which are other stories that they write. So it's incumbent upon us to learn about newsworthy events. We need to learn what are real events and what are false events, or what are known in the industry as pseudo events. And we need to be thinking about how we're going to craft those and work those into our overall marketing plan. Yeah, PR is really, PR often finds itself sitting sometimes in the marketing realm, and other times in the executive communications realm, and sometimes in a total cutout all by itself that's called public relations. Now, if you're a student of traditional marketing, you may be familiar with the concept of the 4 Ps. Professor McCartney, I believe, back in the 60s, I'm trying to remember which one of my books this first appeared in. I think it was McCartney. He wrote about the fact that what the marketer's job is to play with the mix of things that can be controlled to move a product or a brand. And a product may be an idea, so it all falls into the same realm. He called this the 4 Ps, and they were product, price, place, and promotion. Well, over the years, clever marketers have said, well, really, public relations begins with P, isn't it? The 5 Ps. So sometimes it's actually built right into the marketing department, is public relations. But no matter how you slice it or dice it, public relations will always straddle the realm of marketing, public relations, and executive communication. So in the realm of public relations, what we see are spokespeople. Give you an example. Every time you watch a presidential news conference with the press secretary, or for any formal organization where there's somebody speaking on behalf of management, they are the press secretary for that organization, and they are in essence a spokesperson for the organization. Whew. Been talking a lot. The reason I wanted to go through the where does public relations sit? Because again, in some companies, it's part of executive communications. In other companies, it is just marketing. Now, to understand this, there are some folks that say marketing is a boundary organization. It sits at the edge of certain boundaries. And when you think about what I just told you, that makes sense, because if it's executive communications, it's sitting at the edge of the executive team for the company and communicating what the executives of the company, president, CEO, et cetera, want to tell not only their employees, but all their external stakeholders as well. So let's talk for a moment, since I put this term out there, stakeholder. Can an employee be a stakeholder? Absolutely. An employee is always a stakeholder. The definition of stakeholder is somebody that can be impacted by the action of the company. In the modern sense of stakeholder, a stakeholder can also have impact. It's anybody that can have impact on the company itself, creating a symbiotic two-way flow of the relationship, both from the organization to individuals and groups, and from individuals and groups back to the organization. So that's what the term stakeholder is. Sometimes we get confused with a similar word, stockholder. Stockholder is somebody that has financial interest in the company. Now, can a stockholder be a stakeholder? By definition, yes. Okay? But not all stockholders not all stakeholders. I knew I was going down the wrong path there. Could you see the wheels running? Not all stakeholders are going to be stockholders. That's the difference. All right, week one, you've got 3 hefty discussions. I want you to do lots of research, because the hallmark of a master's graduate is their ability to dig to root cause, to research problems, and then find appropriate solutions through benchmarking and other research. You have 3 very hefty discussions. You need to have citations, and you need to have references for those discussions. I think you're really going to enjoy each of them. The first one, it really lays the ethical and the philosophical groundwork for what we do in communication. The second one, I'm asking you to watch a video. It's a 4-hour video. Can you watch just 1 hour of it? Sure. I'm hopeful after you watch the first hour that you'll watch all 4, because it will scare the living daylights out of you. It's a documentary, but you're going to think it's a horror show. The documentary is the nexus. In other words, it's the meeting point, the juncture of marketing, public relations, psychology, and politics. All right? And it covers the century. Well, it covers 3/4 of a century in terms of total years, from 1924 to 2000. And I guess they call it the century itself because we got to 1924. The people that were commenting on 1924, they grew up in the first 24 years of the century. So some of the key people that you'll want to follow in this are going to be folks like Edward Bernays, the modern father of marketing and public relations. Edward Bernays lived a very long time. He was born in 1892, and would you believe me if I told you he made 2 different appearances on the Late Show with David Letterman? 2 different times. They thought when he appeared the first time he was in his 90s and that he would obviously never come back. Well, he came back even later. Edward Bernays was germane and relevant to the public relations and marketing fields all the way up until his death in 1995. Many things that you hear on the radio, that you see on TV, that you see marketers doing, those roots were laid by Edward Bernays. Now, the very first textbook for public relations was appropriately called Public Relations, was not written until 1952, and it was written by Edward Bernays. Prior to 1952, there was no official word for this discipline, for this science. Bernays had been trying to promote since the 20s the concept that people that practice propaganda had a negative connotation even then. And he wanted to see those individuals rise to the same status of attorneys and people that worked with the law. So he began using the term public relations counselor, but it never really took off. It wasn't until 1952, when he wrote the book Public Relations, that the industry had its name and its title. Bernays wrote a couple other books. In 1924, he wrote Crystallizing Public Opinion. It is a study in affinity groups. Why is that important? Because that's what we do with social media and really all advertising when you think about Seth Groton and the concept of tribes. All right. So 3, I didn't tell you the last one. The last discussion has you take a look at a public relations crisis. And the public relations crisis is the film production firm Rust LLC. And the executive producer for Rust, and also the film, the star of the film that would have been made, which is Alec Baldwin. I give you a ton of links. Some of those links you're going to need to dig through to get the information that you want. I will tell you that if you can't answer this question, you haven't done enough research. What movie is the last time someone died on set during production? What was the name of the movie? And even better yet, what happened to the producers? If you can't answer those questions, you're not prepared, and you need to answer a whole lot more questions, by the way. I'm just telling you those two. If you can't answer those questions, then you're not prepared to do crisis management with regard to the Rust LLC situation. Okay? And you can expect your grade to reflect that as well. Another question that you need to ask is, what is Hollywood's standard practices with regard to firearms? Yes, there are standard practices. There are safety manuals. And there's 2 different places where you can go, and I provide you one of those. So make sure that you dig into that information. Whew. Week 2, we get to, are you ready for this? We get to writing a press release. Really what we're doing in week 2 is learning about newsworthy events. Week 3, we talk about what you do with the newsworthy event once you created it, once you create the press release. Do you only create one press release? Or do you create a series of press releases? Or do you create other vehicles as well? And we'll talk about that so that you have a good feel. That'll be your distribution plan, your strategic distribution plan in week 3. And then in week 4, we have you deal with a real crisis. That's a lot to go through in 1 month. But I think you're going to find it very interesting, and I think you're gonna find that again, the amount of critical thinking you will have developed as a result of this course are going to set you up perfectly for graduation and make you that much stronger in every other class you have down the road. All right, folks. This is Dr. John. If you have any questions, 407-267-8600.